What's up? So the channel recently hit 500,000 subscribers, which is an absurd number for me to think about. I can't believe there are 500,000 of you that care enough to watch what I do. So thank you to all of you who have subscribed. For this week's video, I thought it would be interesting to answer some of your guys' questions, since most of what I do on here is all hands and pans, either top down or straight ahead looking at what I'm cooking. Some of you have probably never even seen my face before, so if that's you, hello, I'm Josh. Thanks for being a subscriber. I've got a feeling this video is going to get pretty long, so I'm going to include chapters down here that you can scrub through the video and find the questions that you find relevant. The best way to watch this is probably just to put it on in the background and listen, and if you find anything that's interesting, just click back over to this tab. So in this video, I'm going to cover some meal prepping best practices, how I go about fitness and nutrition, as well as a little bit about me. So first question, let's get started. Do you have a culinary background? Nope, I didn't go to culinary school. The only real kitchen experience I have is working in a pizza shop in high school, and it's not like I was a line cook or anything. I was just a pizza monkey, so that doesn't really count. All we had is a couple of ovens and some fryers, but that's where I began to really like and enjoy cooking. My favorite day to work was always Sunday morning because we'd prep for service, we'd get everything done early, and then we'd cook breakfast for everybody that was working. And that's where I could start to begin to experiment with different things. You know, that's where I learned that you can cook scrambled eggs in the oven, or you can put stuff in the fryer and you can make delicious things out of it. So that was in high school. Then in college, I would cook for my roommates and I, back before I even knew what meal prepping was. I didn't even know meal prep was a word that existed, but I would cook a bunch of food, keep it in the fridge, and then we would eat it for lunches and dinner through the week. Meal prepping back then was almost exclusive to the bodybuilding.com forums, where it was just bodybuilders talking about their chicken, rice, and broccoli. And it wasn't evolved into the form that it is today, where it's not just for fitness and it's not just for bodybuilders. It's for people that want to save money, or they want to save time, or just make eating better easier. So back to the original question, no, I didn't go to culinary school. All of my experience cooking has just been throughout my life, whether it was in that pizza shop, cooking for my roommates in college, or just experimenting in my own kitchen. All right, moving on. The question I got asked more than anything else: why do you hate vegetables so much? Because they're grotesque and I'm tired of pretending that they're not. They're disgusting, they're vile, they have no redeeming qualities, nothing about them is good. One of my favorite things is when people say, well, haven't you ever tried fried Brussels sprouts with garlic and butter? Yeah, it's disgusting. It's one of the worst things I've ever eaten. Or they'll say, whenever somebody says they don't like vegetables, all I can think about is how they don't know how to cook. Is that really true? Because I've been to some fancy restaurants with some top quality chefs, and every vegetable I've had there is a 0 out of 10. Vegetables are gross, they have bad texture, they have bad flavor, they're hard to cook, they don't keep well in the fridge. But if you're going to be the healthiest person alive, which I am, you got to eat them. So I just don't be a cry-ass about it, and I put them in my meals. Can we get a tour of your kitchen? Sure. So when I purchased the house this summer, I completely redid the kitchen. There was a half wall separating the living room from the kitchen right here that I took out, and then the flooring was all tile. I got rid of that. The only thing that remained the same in the kitchen is the cabinets, but I took all the doors off of those and used some grain filler on them to fill in all the grain. Then I painted them white and I painted the island black. I put in a new sink and kitchen countertops along with a range hood, and then this sliding glass door used to be a bay window, and then the window next to it was where the exterior door used to be, so I walled that off and then extended the countertops out about 4 feet. Unfortunately, I accidentally deleted all the videos I have of what it looked like before, but I do have this picture so you can get an idea of what it did look like. For the appliances, I decided on the Bosch 800 series for the fridge, range, and dishwasher. It was pretty middle of the pack when it comes to pricing. It wasn't the cheapest stuff you can buy, but I got all three of these for the same price you can get a Viking or a Wolf stove for, so it wasn't the most expensive either. The entire reason I chose this set was because I felt the fridge had a freezer that was best set up for Snack City. It's got a double drawer in it where the bottom drawer is big enough to lay down a sheet pan in for whenever I need to flash freeze stuff, and it also has plenty of storage for the rest of the stuff in Snack City. In some of my older videos, there are a few clips where you can see the background of my house, and I've seen a couple of comments from you guys asking why it's so bare. The reason is because I just don't have a lot of stuff, and I have no reason to put furniture in there because I never sit on it. So I want to keep it blank in case one day I ever want to put in a basketball court, or maybe I want to build a moon board or a kilter board in my living room. It needs to stay open for the possibility of maximal fun. What was your initial introduction to pursuing fitness as a career, and how did you transition that into the meal prep manual? So coming out of high school, like most kids, I had no idea what I wanted to do. My parents said, go to college, you'll figure it out there. So I went to Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri, and I met my roommate Josh, who was a exercise science major, and I saw the classes he was taking. I was like, hey, that sounds pretty cool. I think I would like that. So I started taking classes in exercise science. As I was going through college, I was thinking about what my career prospects might be. With an exercise science degree, there's only a few things you can do if you don't want to go to graduate school. You can be an exercise physiologist, or you can be a personal trainer. If you wanted to go to more schooling, you could go to med school or you could go to PT school. None of that really interests me though. But I had taken a liking to research. And in 2014, I went to Sao Paulo, Brazil to work at the University of Sao Paulo in a biology lab. Then I came back home for my senior year of college and I continued on with research, and I studied some exercise physiology research here to finish my senior year. So as I finished college, I decided that my next step would be to go to graduate school and get my PhD to continue on with the research field. And I enrolled in a university in Arizona to get my PhD in cardiovascular physiology. So here's where the fun starts. I didn't really want to do that. But because I didn't have any job prospects or anything that I wanted to do with my degree after college, I thought that the next logical step in the progression, what society tells you to do, is you go to graduate school and you continue the momentum that you created in your undergrad. So I enrolled in that graduate school. So in between the time that I finished my undergrad program and the time where I was supposed to begin my graduate studies, I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and it completely changed the direction of my life. It made me realize you don't have to do what society tells you to do. You can create your own path. You can do what you want. You can build a business. And that really soured my idea of going to graduate school. I called up the PI of whose lab I was going to be working in, and I said, "Hey man, I'm not fucking leaving. I'm not coming." And he goes, "What do you mean you're not coming? You have to come." And he said this to me. He goes, "Your degree's worthless. You'll never find a job with that degree. In order to make money, you have to continue with your education and get something that matters." And obviously that's something that I've never forgotten. So then I said to him, "Listen here, the thought of me sitting in your lab for the next 5 years studying metabolic rates in tilapia," that was what his lab was. He used tilapia to measure metabolic rates. I said, "The thought of me sitting in your lab studying those metabolic rates in tilapia makes me want to blow my brains out. So don't expect me tomorrow. Don't expect me the day after that. Don't expect me ever. Good luck with your pet fish, nerd." And I hung up and I never talked to him again. Then I said to myself, "Look, you sorry sack of shit. You don't have a job. You don't have any prospects. What are you doing?" And I decided to start a business. So I started writing a cookbook that next night. And I built the cookbook. I started selling it online. Sometime in there, I got a job personal training at the Harley-Davidson factory where I would help their workers build up the strength in their wrist and stuff so they wouldn't get hurt when they were turning wrenches. It was a bullshit job. So I was personal training part-time. I was trying to build a business part-time. Then a few weeks later, I found a full-time job working at the railroad. And my job there was basically to do what everybody else didn't want to do, which was all the boring regulatory stuff. And it made me want to blow my brains out again. So I continued with the personal training and the full-time job and the building the business until it just got to be too much. And I quit the personal training job and I just focused on my full-time work at the railroad and building my business on the side after I got home from work. So I continued doing that for about 3 years. So in 2019, I had built the business to a point where I was doing well enough to be able to quit my job. I quit my job. I moved to Seattle with my roommate and his wife, who was doing travel nursing. So I followed them around for a couple of years and I continued to build the business and build it into the website that you guys know today as mealprepmanual.com. So it started with just one digital cookbook. It eventually grew into 2 cookbooks and then 3 cookbooks. And then in 2019 is when I started to build that website and made it into what you guys know and love today. What does your training look like? In the past year or so, I would say my training has drastically changed from what it used to be in the past. I'm only lifting about 3 days a week now, and even when I go lift, if I'm being honest, I pretty much just half-ass it, mainly because I just like to play squash now. But in the past, when I first started lifting about a decade ago, I started with like a bodybuilding, powerlifting style of training where I would do heavy workouts on the first couple of days of the week, and then later in the week I would do more hypertrophy-based workouts. Throughout college, I kind of did that. And then in 2014, my roommates and I were introduced to CrossFit. So from 2014 through about 2021, I followed a CrossFit style workout where I would start with some sort of heavy compound lift, and then I would follow that up with a couple of accessory movements and then finish off the day with some sort of metabolic conditioner. And that was something that I could compete with my friends in. We found it enjoyable. I was getting stronger. I didn't really care about gaining muscle, and I still really don't care about gaining muscle today. I'm pretty happy with the size I'm at, especially now that I've moved towards more playing squash. A lot of the good squash players are just string beans. They're tall and lanky and they want to be light on their feet so they can move around the court. So I really don't have a need to be 190 pounds and full of muscle if I want to play squash more often, which I do. Are there any foods you won't eat? Well, I told you earlier how I feel about vegetables, so there's that, but I still eat those. And I wouldn't say I'm picky, but I definitely have textural issues around some foods. For example, watermelon, one of my favorite foods on the planet, but it is jackpot or bust for me. I have to cut out every single seed in the watermelon, white or black, and if I chomp down on a seed or I taste a seed, it just ruins it for me and I can't continue eating. I don't eat salmon anymore. A few years back, I got a piece of salmon and it had worms in it, and it just killed salmon for me for the rest of time. My main issue with vegetables is the texture thing. I just don't like the way they feel in my mouth. I don't like how my teeth touch the vegetables when I chew. And I mean, the flavor is just terrible. Kind of the same thing with chicken too, or I guess poultry in general. Really, I just don't really care for birds as a whole. But if I'm biting down on a piece of chicken that had like a bone in it and I accidentally chew on some gristle, it's over. Or if I'm eating some chicken wings and I see a tiny little feather, I won't touch them. There's just little things like that, but I'll try anything once. What are your hobbies outside of work? There's a lot of things that I like to do, but I have a bit of an obsessive personality, and once I find one, I just will carry on with that until I get tired of it. And right now for me, that's squash. I started playing squash a little bit before the pandemic started, and I got maybe a month into it, and then everything shut down, and I wasn't able to pick it up again until this past July in 2021. So ever since then, it's just been like squash nonstop for me. I've tried to play almost every single day. And I mentioned earlier, it's affected my ability to weight train because anytime I go to the gym and I see people playing squash, I can't just go lift. That's boring. I got to go play squash. So I'd say I spend about 10 to 12 hours a week playing squash. And then the other thing I love is watching movies. I'm trying to watch 150 movies this year. I think I'm about 125 in. I do work a lot. So on top of work and squash and movies, there's not much else I do right now, but I do love the Miami Dolphins and the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I'll watch the Dolphins every Sunday, and I try to catch every Thunder game, but you know, there's 82 of those. So if I miss one, it's not that big of a deal to me. And another question I get asked often, why do you hold your fork like that? That's just how I hold my fork. That's how I've always done it. And let me tell you what, I believe it is the optimal way to hold a fork. People will say, that's how babies hold their fork. No, babies hold their fork like this, with the thumb underneath. I hold the fork with the thumb over the top. I got leverage. That's not going anywhere. If I put the thumb underneath, there's nothing to push against. Wrap the fingers around, thumb over the top. You got all the leverage in the world. Straight from the plate to my mouth in one motion. It is the greatest way to hold a fork, and my mind will not be changed. Moving along. Can you show us your camera setup? Sure. So I run a 2-camera setup. I've got one on an overhead mount and then one on a tripod out in front of me. So I built a overhead mount out of 1-inch PVC pipes, and then I just clamped the camera onto it with a C-clamp. The camera on top is a Sony a6400. The lens is just a cheap lens that came with the camera. I think it's 16 to 50 millimeters. I don't even know what those numbers mean. I just put the lens on the camera and I turn it on. The camera out in front is a Sony a6500, and that one has a bit more expensive 35 millimeter lens on it. Again, I have no idea what that means, but the shots look okay, so I'm not going to read into it any deeper. Then for lighting, I use a box light with a diffuser on it, and then just a big studio light that I point up towards the ceiling so it can deflect off the white ceiling and cast a little bit softer light down over the top. And then I also just use the regular can lights that I have here in my kitchen. Then for external monitors, so that I can see what I'm doing, I've got a tablet set up that's connected to the camera out in front. Then I've got my old phone set up to the camera that's overhead. And this is just so I can see what's going on, so I don't have to walk around to the other side of the camera. I can make sure everything's in focus right here with me, and I don't have to spend any extra time dicking around, touching buttons on the back side of the cameras. Can you meal prep fish? Yeah, I can. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Phil 4:13, Tim Tebow 2009. But should you meal prep fish? Probably not. Fish is super delicate. It's not going to last too well in the fridge, maybe 1 or 2 days at the max. And on top of that, you should only keep it in your house if you're going to meal prep fish. If you meal prep fish and you bring it to work, you will quickly become the pariah of your office. And you don't want that. It's not fun for anybody but you. So there's a reason you don't ever see any fish meal prep recipes on my website. I don't want to be responsible for any of that. Also, I just don't like fish that much. How do you stay consistent with meal prepping and planning? Don't you get tired of eating the same thing every day? Let me start with the second part of that question first. No, I don't get tired of eating the same thing every day, but I think that's part of who I am as a person. As I mentioned earlier, I've got a bit of an obsessive personality. I've got textural issues with food. I enjoy the patterns and the consistency that meal prep brings to my life. And, you know, I used to work with trains, so you do the math on that one, babies. I think to be consistent with meal prepping, the most important thing to consider is, do I actually want to eat the food that I'm making? If you're going to meal prep plain chicken, rice, and broccoli every week, you're probably not going to be too excited to eat that, and I doubt you're going to want to be consistent with it either. But if you're making a variety of different meals that you can change up each week, you have different flavors, it's going to be easier for you to stick to that. Next, you should find a sweet spot for how many days you want to prep for at a time. For some people, that might only be 2 days. For me, that's 5 days. The reason I chose 5 days is because when I first started meal prepping, I was doing it for work and I needed a lunch for every day of the work week. I think the perfect timing for optimal freshness is 3 days, as you do see some decrease in freshness on day 4 and a little bit more on day 5. But for me, it was worth it to only have to cook once, that I was okay with that decrease in freshness on day 4 and day 5. So if having fresher meals in the fridge would help you to be more consistent, I would recommend starting with maybe 2 or 3 days instead of doing the full 5 days. You should find that sweet spot and where it is for you, whether it's 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days, in order to help you stay consistent with meal prepping. I think it also helps to have a reason to meal prep, have a goal in mind for what you're trying to achieve, whether that's to save money, to save time, or to help reach a weight loss or weight gain goal. Using meal prep as a tool, I think, will help you to stay consistent in meal prepping because you're going to something larger. You're trying to grow to something bigger. What containers do you use for meal prep? So I use a combination of plastic and glass. Recently, I've gotten more into using glass containers just because I have this house now. I'm not moving around as much as I was a few years back. So, trucking around a bunch of glass isn't as difficult as it could have been when I was moving from city to city. In terms of glass containers, these IKEA 365 ones are probably my favorite. I still don't love them. I don't like the shape of them. I don't like the lid, but they're the best glass containers I've found. They're better than these Pyrex ones. These Pyrex ones are too small. I think these are 5 cup and the lids are just pieces of junk. I've also got these glass ones from Amazon, and just about every glass meal prep container on Amazon is going to be the same because I'm pretty sure they come from the same factory, and they've got the wrong shape. I don't like the lip around them. The lids don't fit. The gasket that goes around on the inside of the lid always comes off. They're just not fun to use. So if I were to pick glass meal prep containers, I would choose the IKEA 365 first. But again, not my favorite. I'm still working on trying to create my own line of glass meal prep containers, but I'm not having any luck doing it. For plastic meal prep containers, I just buy some cheap black ones off Amazon. I do reuse these. They're not single use. I put them in the dishwasher and they seem to be fine as long as they don't crack. Some of these I've had for like 3 or 4 years. I should probably toss them by now, but they're still in the rotation for the time being. The plastic ones are hit or miss. Sometimes you find one on Amazon that's got good quality plastic, it's a little bit sturdier. And then sometimes you get them that are just so flimsy that you put them in the dishwasher once and they're warped forever. I had found a good brand that I liked for the black plastic ones. And then a year or 2 ago, I guess they changed their formulation of the plastic because now they just sell the flimsy ones. I'll link one in the description below that I found recently, but that one is like a 4 out of 10 if I had to give it a rating. What are your favorite kitchen items or must-haves? I've kept a pretty minimal kitchen for the past 3 or 4 years. Basically, what I would say for a good meal prep kitchen, what I could not live without is a nice big wood cutting board, a good kitchen knife, a big pan to cook stuff in that I can meal prep lots of food at once, and then my air fryer. I couldn't live without the air fryer. I use that literally every single day. I've got 2 big wood cutting boards. This one is from Zwilling, and then this other one is a booze block. I use these interchangeably. They're both good. They both do what they need to do. They're just cutting boards. Another must-have is a good high-quality chef's knife, and the one that I use most often recently is this Zwilling Pro 8-inch chef's knife. But for the majority of the past 3 years, and in most of the videos on this channel, the knife that you've seen is this Henkel's 8-inch Forged Premio chef's knife. If you've watched previous videos, you guys know that I do work with Zwilling, but this video is not sponsored in any way. They're not paying me to say any of this. I really do believe that Zwilling makes the best knives on the planet. A few years back, I bought a $200+ knife from Wusthof thinking that that was the gold standard, and it's a complete piece of junk. I hate it. It's not weighted well. I don't like the way it feels in my hand. The handle cuts into my hand as I'm chopping things, and I don't even know where it's at anymore. I think it's sitting in a drawer somewhere at my parents' house. The Zwilling knives, though, I stand by these. These are my favorite knives I've ever touched. Zwilling has treated me exceptionally well since I started working with them, and it's awesome for me to be able to say that they make great stuff and that I would recommend that you guys use them because I think they deserve it. So again, this video isn't sponsored by them, but if you are in the market for new knives or new cookware, that's the first place I would recommend that you look. What process do you go through when building a recipe for meal prepping? Great question. There's a number of different things that go through my head when I am starting to develop a new recipe. Recipe development for me starts off first with just an idea, and this can be anything. It could be I'm walking through the grocery store and I see a jar of buffalo sauce and I think to myself, oh, I wonder what I could make with that buffalo sauce. Or maybe I have a dish in mind that I just want to make meal prep friendly. Like I go out to a restaurant and I have a butter chicken and I want to make that butter chicken into a meal prep recipe. Whatever it is, I start with an idea first, and then I reverse engineer it from there. I think to myself, how can I make this more meal prep friendly? There's certain liberties that we have to take with meal prep in order to make things more friendly to keep in the fridge and reheat in the microwave. So traditional style of preparing things doesn't always work. I try and make all of my meals balanced, so the general template I follow for everything I make is going to be protein, carb, and then vegetable. So I got my idea, and then I'll pick out what each of those I want to use for that meal, and then from there I can move on to how the actual technique and preparation of the meal is going to go. So from there, I think about things like, how's the meat going to be cut? Is it ground meat? Am I going to dice it up after I cook it? Am I going to dice it up before I cook it? Am I not going to cut it at all? Or things like, how do the vegetables fit in the meal? Am I going to try and hide these within the meal, within a sauce, cut them up small? Or is it just going to be something that is an additional thing on the side where it's not as hidden? So I take all those things into account, and I test the meal. I want to know if it tastes good. I want to know how it looks in the meal prep container. Is the presentation good? If it doesn't look good, I'm probably not going to want to eat it. So it's not something that's ever going to make it to the website. So if it tastes good, I like the way it looks, it keeps well in the fridge, it reheats well in the microwave, then it will make its way on the website. That's how the bulk of my recipe development goes. Sometimes I get it right the first try. Sometimes it takes me 3 or 4 tries. Sometimes I just never get it right. For example, I've tried to make protein cookies for 5 or 6 years now. Never once gotten it right. It's almost impossible to make a good protein cookie without the use of a lot of sugar or fat. Turns out cookies need those things. All right, that should do it for today. If you have any other questions, drop them down below in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. And again, thank you to all of you who watch these videos and subscribe to the channel and support me. It's truly wild to me to think that there are 500,000 of you who have cared enough to hit that subscribe button and watch what I have to say. So thank you again. See you cats next week.